The scent of lilies and lies choked me the moment I stepped into that grand hall, a place built for celebration, not for the tearing down of a mother's heart. My hands, they were shaking, but not from the chill of the air conditioning or the nervousness of a special occasion. No, these tremors were born of a cold, searing rage, a kind that burns so deep it turns your insides to ash, leaving only a hollow space where love once lived. Every crystal on the chandelier seemed to mock me, twinkling like the diamonds on Sarah's finger, a symbol of the shiny new life my son had chosen to build, a life where I, his mother, had no place. I am Eliza Mae Jenkins, a name whispered in our community with respect, a woman who had given everything, bled herself dry for the boy now standing before me, poised to break me into a million pieces. He saw me then, his eyes, once so full of innocent adoration, now held a chilling contempt, a mirroring of the disdain etched on Sarah's perfectly made-up face. My son Marcus, the man I raised, bathed, fed, and sacrificed for, was looking at me like I was a stranger, an unwanted ghost from a past he desperately wanted to erase. He began to speak, his voice low, but each word was a dagger, twisting deeper with every syllable. He said I was an embarrassment, that my presence would ruin his perfect day, that my old-fashioned ways and even my very appearance were a stain on his newfound elegance. The room, full of strangers and a few familiar faces who quickly looked away, seemed to shrink around me, the air growing heavy with his cruel words. A sharp, breathless gasp escaped me, though no sound truly came out. It was a silent scream, echoing only in the chambers of my own wounded heart. He kept going relentlessly, his voice rising now, drawing the attention of guests who pretended not to listen but strained their ears all the same. He spoke of his new life, his new family, his new future, emphasizing the new, as if everything that came before, everything I was something to be discarded like old furniture. His words were a public lynching of my spirit, painting me as an ugly relic unworthy to stand beside his chosen bride. This wasn't just about a wedding. It was a true story of resilience, one that began long before this moment, a survival story whispered through generations of Black women in my family. And then Sarah, his fiancée, stepped forward, her smile too sweet, too knowing. She placed a hand on Marcus's arm, her touch a clear signal of ownership, a subtle betrayal in itself. She whispered something to him, her eyes flicking to me with a smug satisfaction that churned my stomach. It was in that moment, seeing their twisted unity, that a profound truth hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just Marcus's doing. This was a calculated, shared act of cheating me out of my dignity, a real-life story of manipulation unfolding right before my eyes. This wasn't a sudden explosion of anger. It was a planned execution of my worth, a family revenge story dressed up as a wedding. My mind reeled back to all the little moments, the subtle shifts, the way Marcus had started pulling away, the hushed phone calls, the sudden secretive nature he adopted after meeting Sarah. It wasn't just infidelity stories in a romantic sense. It was an infidelity to our bond, a betrayal of everything a mother-son relationship should be. He had been so quick to believe her, to absorb her disdain for me, to make it his own. The dark family secrets that always lay buried beneath the surface of seemingly perfect lives were now boiling over, exposed for anyone with eyes to see. My throat tightened, not with tears but with a fierce, burning resolve. He finished his tirade, his chest puffing out slightly, as if he had just delivered a powerful sermon. Then, with a dismissive wave of his hand, a gesture of casual cruelty that cut deeper than any shout, he motioned to the burly security guard standing nearby. "Escort my mother out," he commanded, his voice dripping with icy finality. "She is not welcome here." The guards moved towards me, their faces impassive, merely following orders. But as they reached me, Sarah's eyes met mine once more, and this time her sly smile broadened, a flash of pure malice that confirmed everything. This wasn't about me being ugly. It was about her wanting me gone, wanting me silenced. They thought I would cry, that I would beg, that I would shrink away in shame. They thought I would disappear quietly into the night, like a ghost banished from a haunted house. They believed their carefully constructed narrated life stories of success and happiness would be unblemished by my presence. They had no idea that this public humiliation, this raw, visceral pain, was not my end but my beginning. Oh, they had no idea what I had already left behind. A quiet mark that would ensure this moment, This profound betrayal would be a sweet revenge short story they'd replay in their minds for a lifetime. My head held high, I allowed the guards to lead me away, my steps steady despite the earthquake in my soul. Every eye in that room was on me, judging, pitying, or perhaps silently understanding. Let them watch. Let them talk. Because they had just witnessed the breaking point of a grandmother, a quiet, underestimated woman, who was about to unleash a karma story unlike any they had ever heard. You'll want to see what happens next. Make sure to subscribe and stay tuned for what's coming, because this true story with a twist has only just begun. The shock of being thrown out of Marcus's wedding, the sting of his words, it all hit me hard, but it wasn't new. This kind of casual cruelty, this dismissiveness, it had roots that stretched back years, deeper than anyone outside our family could imagine. My fury at that moment wasn't just about the wedding day. It was a lifetime of little cuts finally bleeding out. To truly understand why that public shaming felt like the final nail, you need to know the story that came before, the one whispered in hushed tones, the one I lived. I grew up in a vibrant but tough part of town, where everyone knew your business, for better or worse. My mother always taught me the value of hard work, of holding your head high, no matter what. That's what I poured into Marcus, my only child. I worked tirelessly, 2 jobs, sometimes 3, cleaning houses, cooking for folks, anything to make sure he had more than I did. I remember nights falling asleep at the kitchen table, my hands aching, just so I could sign him up for that special math club or buy him the shiny new shoes he wanted. My sister, Clara, she was always around, seemingly supportive, but her compliments often felt laced with a hidden judgment. "Eliza, you work so hard, bless your heart," she'd say, but her eyes would linger on my worn clothes, or the tired lines around my eyes, subtly reminding me of my endless struggle. Marcus was my world. Every choice I made, every sacrifice was for him. I remember one winter, he had his heart set on this expensive computer for school. My savings weren't enough. It was then that I made a decision that still aches in my memory. My grandmother's locket, a delicate gold piece with a tiny sapphire, was my most treasured possession, the only real heirloom in our family. It was a piece of my history, a tangible link to the strong women who came before me. I sold it. Didn't tell a soul, especially not Marcus. Just wanted him to have what he needed. The pang in my heart as I handed it over, that silent goodbye to a piece of my past, was sharp. But seeing the joy on his face when he got that computer, I told myself it was worth it. That's what mothers do, right? We give until there's nothing left. As Marcus grew, so did his ambition. He was smart, no doubt about it. Got himself into a good college, and I worked even harder to keep him there. Mr. Henderson, our elderly neighbor, a kind soul with wise eyes, would often bring me a cup of tea on those late nights. He never said much, but his quiet presence was a comfort. He saw more than most, I think, saw the sacrifices, the endless giving. Marcus's Auntie May, his father's sister, was another story. She was always the one whispering grand ideas in his ear, filling his head with dreams of high society and wealth. She'd subtly undermine my simple ways, making him feel like my life, my background wasn't enough for his bright future. She painted pictures of a world I didn't belong to, driving a wedge between us without ever saying a harsh word directly. I remember one visit home during his college years. He'd come back transformed, speaking with a new accent, correcting my grammar, laughing when I used an old saying he deemed unsophisticated. He dismissed my concerns about the company he was keeping, the lavish spending habits he was developing. "Mama, you just don't understand how things work in my world now," he'd say, waving a dismissive hand. It was a small crack, a tiny fracture in our bond. I told myself it was just him growing up, finding his own way. But looking back, it was the first warning sign, a faint whisper of the arrogance that would one day scream at me from a wedding altar. I ignored it, blinded by a mother's fierce love and overwhelming pride. I couldn't see then that he wasn't just growing. He was drifting, becoming ashamed of the very roots that had nurtured him, the roots that were still trying to hold him steady. The distance grew, subtle at first, then more pronounced. Phone calls became shorter, visits less frequent. He'd make excuses, always busy, always important. And then he met Sarah. She was beautiful, charming, with a polished veneer that seemed to captivate him entirely. I remember her first visit, her saccharine smile, her endless compliments. She called me Mama Eliza. But her eyes, when she thought I wasn't looking, held a cold, calculating glint. She was too perfect, almost. She'd suggest things to Marcus, seemingly innocent ideas, like how he should take control of my finances, to ease my burden. She even subtly implied to family friends that I was becoming a bit forgetful, that it was for my own good. I heard the whispers in the community, the way people started looking at me with a new kind of pity. Clara, my sister, would often add fuel to the fire, nodding along to Auntie Mae's gossip, making it seem like I was indeed losing my way. I was too trusting, too focused on seeing the best in my son, to notice the slow, insidious poisoning of his mind, the careful dismantling of my reputation. I was so used to being the backbone, the giver, that I couldn't imagine my own child, or his chosen partner, could harbor such darkness. The warning signs were there, small and insignificant at the time, like a persistent itch you ignore until it becomes an unbearable rash. I wish I had paid closer attention, because if I had, maybe I would have seen the trap before I walked right into it, blindly, heart first. My deepest pain wasn't just the betrayal itself, but the realization that I had actively helped them lay the groundwork for my own destruction. The memory of that public humiliation, the echo of Marcus's cruel words, it still burns. But the truth is, what happened at that wedding wasn't just a sudden, ugly outburst. It was the result of a slow, creeping poison, a conspiracy that had been brewing for years, right under my nose. Looking back now, the pieces fit together with a chilling precision, revealing a betrayal far deeper than I ever imagined. A web woven by people I trusted. It started subtly after Marcus got his big promotion. He began talking about my small house, the one I'd owned free and clear for decades, the one my mama had left me. He'd say, "Mama, you shouldn't have to worry about bills. Let me handle everything. I can set up a trust, manage your finances. It'll protect your assets." He sounded so concerned, so responsible. I was so proud of him, my successful son looking out for his aging mother. I signed the papers he put in front of me, power of attorney, he called it. It felt like a weight off my shoulders, a relief. I never read the fine print, not really. Why would I? It was my son. That was my first mistake, a mistake that would cost me everything. Soon after, my pension check started to feel lighter. Marcus would explain it away with complicated words. Market fluctuations, investment adjustments, tax implications. He'd wave his hand, telling me not to worry my pretty little head about it, that he was taking care of everything. I trusted him. I always had. He was my boy. He even convinced me to let him pay my household bills directly, saying it was more efficient. I thought, bless his heart, he's just trying to make my life easier. I had no idea he was slowly, systematically cutting off my lifeline, making me dependent on him. Then came the bigger blows. One afternoon, a stern-looking man from the bank showed up at my door. He handed me a notice, cold and official. Foreclosure. On my house. My home. My heart stopped. I felt the blood drain from my face. I called Marcus in a panic, my voice trembling. He sounded annoyed. "Mama, it's just a technicality," he snapped. "A temporary glitch with some paperwork. I'm handling it." He promised to fix it, to make it disappear. He even introduced me to a smooth-talking real estate agent, Mr. Sterling, who had a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Mr. Sterling kept pushing more papers for me to sign, talking about refinancing and asset consolidation. He seemed so helpful, but something felt off. I couldn't place it then. The rumors started swirling in our community, carried mostly by my sister Clara and Auntie Mae. Clara, always so quick to highlight my forgetfulness, would sigh dramatically to church members, "Poor Eliza, she's just not as sharp as she used to be. Thank goodness Marcus is looking after her affairs." Auntie Mae, meanwhile, would paint Marcus as a saint, rescuing his incompetent mother from her own poor choices. They crafted a narrative, a cruel story about my supposed decline, making it seem perfectly logical for Marcus to take control. They were building a cage around me, one made of gossip and manufactured concern, and I was too blind, too trusting to see it. One evening, after Marcus and Sarah left my house, or what I thought was still my house, I found a stack of mail they'd accidentally left behind. Buried deep within it was a mortgage statement, addressed to Marcus, with my property as the collateral. The loan amount was huge, far more than my house was worth, far more than Marcus had ever suggested. And then, There was a document detailing a hefty withdrawal from my long-dormant savings account, an account I hadn't touched in years. My signature was on it, but it looked off. My hand didn't tremble when I signed important papers back then. It was suddenly chillingly clear. They weren't just managing my money, they were taking it. The full weight of the betrayal crashed down on me. The pension checks, the foreclosure, the whispers. It all clicked into place. They were systematically stripping me bare, financially and reputationally. The dread built a cold, heavy stone in my stomach. But the ultimate gut punch, the moment that solidified my resolve, came later that week. I overheard Marcus on the phone, his voice hushed, excited. He was talking about a big deposit coming through. Just what they needed for the wedding venue. And then I heard Sarah's laugh, bright and triumphant. Finally, she purred. Your mother's house money is coming through. Our dream wedding is going to be perfect. The sound of her voice, so full of callous glee, using my home, my life savings to pay for their opulent lie, was like a lightning bolt. It jolted me awake. The tears I had been holding back, the ones born of confusion and sorrow, vanished. They were replaced by a cold, steady fury. A switch flipped inside me. I was no longer a naive, trusting mother. I was a woman who had been systematically robbed, humiliated, and discarded by her own flesh and blood. They thought I was a fool, a weak old woman who would simply fade away. They thought they had one. But in that moment, as the last shred of my blind love for Marcus died, I decided they were about to learn a very hard lesson. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The shock of that realization, hearing Sarah gloat about using my house money for their wedding, shattered something deep inside me. It wasn't just anger. It was a cold, desolate despair. The carefully constructed world I had lived in, built on love and trust, crumbled into dust around me. The very next week, the official eviction notice arrived, taped crudely to my front door. It was a stark white paper, a final undeniable proof of their betrayal. My home, the place where I'd raised Marcus, where I'd held him as a baby, where I'd dreamed of growing old, was gone. I remember packing my few belongings, my hands shaking so hard I could barely fold a blanket. Each item I touched felt heavy, not with its own weight, but with the burden of lost memories of a life stolen. The shame was a physical cloak, suffocating me, pressing down on my chest until I could barely breathe. Where would I go? My savings were gone, drained by Marcus and Sarah's schemes. My relatives, swayed by Clara and Auntie May's whispers, offered pitying glances but no real help. I felt utterly alone, abandoned by the very people I had dedicated my life to. That first night, after the movers had cleared out my house and left me standing on the curb with a couple of bags, I ended up on a park bench. The autumn air was biting, seeping into my bones, but the cold inside me was far worse. I watched the city lights twinkle, each one a distant, unreachable star. Tears streamed silently down my face, mingling with the cold drizzle that had started. They weren't just tears of sorrow. They were tears of raw confusion, of profound regret. Had I been so naive, so blind to their greed? Was I truly nothing more than a burden, an ugly old woman as Marcus had so cruelly put it? My body ached, not just from the cold bench, but from the crushing weight of their betrayal, the physical manifestation of a broken heart. It was a complete collapse, every ounce of my spirit feeling utterly depleted. I cried until there were no more tears left, just a dry, burning ache behind my eyes. I questioned everything. My worth, my choices, my very existence. All the sacrifices, all the endless giving, had it been for nothing? Had I poured my life into a bottomless pit, only to be cast aside when I was no longer useful? I thought of my own mother, a strong, resilient woman who had faced her own share of hardships but had never ever buckled. I felt a deep shame, as if I had failed her, failed myself. The cost of survival seemed too high, the path forward invisible. The park bench felt like the end of the line, a desolate place where dreams came to die. Days turned into a blur of shelters and soup kitchens, each one stripping away a little more of my dignity. I tried to reach out to old friends, but the rumors about my mental decline and financial mismanagement had done their work. Doors closed. Phones went unanswered. Even those who once called me Mama Eliza now looked away, embarrassed or perhaps simply unwilling to get involved. The isolation was a new kind of torture, a profound loneliness that gnawed at my soul. My health began to suffer too. The stress, the lack of proper food and rest, left me weak and constantly tired. It felt like I was fading, disappearing just as Marcus and Sarah wanted. But then one cold, lonely evening, as I rummaged through my worn handbag, searching for a tissue, my fingers brushed against something familiar. It was a small, tattered leather-bound journal, a forgotten treasure from my youth. Inside, tucked between faded photographs and pressed flowers, was a crumpled letter. It was from my own grandmother, written years ago, a lifetime ago. Her elegant script spoke of resilience, of the strength of our family, of never letting anyone dim your light, no matter how dark the world became. Our spirit, she had written, is like a flame. Others may try to blow it out, but it burns brightest when the winds are strongest. It wasn't a grand gesture, no sudden rescue. It was just a small, tattered letter, a whisper from the past, but it ignited a tiny, defiant spark within me. It was a reminder of who I was before the world, before Marcus and Sarah tried to break me. I wasn't just an ugly old woman. I was Eliza Mae Jenkins, a woman with a history, a legacy, and a spirit that refused to be extinguished. In that moment, sitting on a cold, uncomfortable cot in a noisy shelter, I realized that while they had taken my home, they couldn't take my story, or my will to fight. This wasn't the end. This was a quiet, internal defiance, the first beat of a drum that would soon roar. If you've ever had to rebuild from ashes, if you've ever felt like your world shattered around you, if you've ever found strength in the darkest of places, stick with me, because this isn't the end of my story. This is just the beginning of how I fought back, how I rose from the ashes stronger than ever before. Make sure to subscribe and stay tuned, because what happens next you won't want to miss. That crumpled letter from my grandmother, a simple piece of paper tucked inside an old journal, became my turning point. It didn't just give me hope, it gave me clarity. The tears dried up, replaced by a cold, steady resolve. I stopped feeling sorry for myself and started thinking, truly thinking, about everything that had happened. The little whispers, the dismissive gestures, the financial trickery. They all started to click into place, forming a picture far more sinister than I had ever imagined. For so long, I believed Marcus was the one leading this charge, the architect of my misery. He was my son after all. His words at the wedding, his casual cruelty, they were undeniable. But as I replayed every interaction in my mind, a chilling truth began to emerge, something far more twisted. The real mastermind wasn't Marcus. It was Sarah. She was the spider spinning the web, and my son, my precious boy, was just her biggest, most foolish fly caught in its sticky threads. I started remembering things differently. Sarah's seemingly innocent suggestions to Marcus about taking care of my finances, her feigned concern when I looked confused about papers, her sly glances at me, like she knew a secret I didn't, her sugary compliments that always felt a little too sweet, a little too false. It wasn't Marcus who suggested the power of attorney. It was Sarah, subtly, persuasively, making him believe it was his idea. She was the one who pushed for the rapid refinancing of my house, the one who found the crooked lawyer, Mr. Sterling. Marcus, blinded by her beauty and his own ambition, had simply followed her lead, too eager to please his future wife to question her motives. She wanted me gone, not just from the wedding, but from Marcus's life entirely, so she could fully control him and his inheritance, which she clearly saw as her own. Just as this terrible truth dawned on me, a lifeline appeared from the most unexpected place. My granddaughter, Maya, Marcus's niece, showed up at the community shelter where I was staying. Maya, bless her heart, had always been a smart, observant girl, and she loved me fiercely. She hadn't bought into the family gossip. She'd been calling around, asking questions, unsettled by the sudden disappearance of her grandma Eliza, and the strange stories circulating. Her dad, my other son who passed years ago, would have been proud of her. Maya, with her quick mind and her knack for computers, started digging. She found inconsistencies in the public property records, tracing the complicated paper trail of my house. She uncovered old emails between Sarah and that shady lawyer, Mr. Sterling, explicitly discussing maximizing assets and managing difficult family members. My name wasn't mentioned, but the dates aligned perfectly with Marcus getting me to sign those papers. It was damning evidence. And then another unexpected ally emerged. Mr. Henderson, my old neighbor. He found me at the shelter looking worn and tired. He sheepishly handed me a small USB drive. He explained he had accidentally recorded a conversation a few months back, while fixing some wiring near his window, where Sarah, thinking no one was listening, was openly bragging to a mutual acquaintance about how she was managing Marcus and how Mama Eliza's house was going to pay for her dream wedding. He'd kept it, uneasy about what he'd heard, but unsure what to do. Now seeing me in the shelter, he knew he had to act. These discoveries didn't fuel a wild, unthinking rage. Instead, they brought a cold, clear determination. My fight was no longer just about vengeance for a perceived slight at a wedding. It was about justice, about exposing the truth of a calculated, cruel fraud, and about reclaiming what was rightfully mine. I felt a profound sense of clarity, like a heavy fog lifting from my mind. I wasn't a helpless victim anymore. I was a survivor seeking justice not just for myself, but for every elder who had been preyed upon. That night, gathered in a quiet corner of the shelter, me, Maya, and Mr. Henderson, we looked at the evidence. The emails, the property records, Sarah's smug voice on the recording. It was all there. I looked at Maya, her young face set with determination, and at Mr. Henderson, his kind eyes filled with quiet support. I slammed my hand gently on the worn table. My voice was firm, resolute, no longer trembling. They mess with the wrong grandmother, I stated, a quiet power thrumming beneath my words. I laid out a plan meticulously, calmly. We would go to the authorities, but not just any authorities. We would hit them where it hurt, expose their deception not just legally, but publicly. I wasn't just defending myself. I was striking back, not out of blind rage, but with the cold, hard precision of someone who had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. I was no longer the victim. I was the strategist. I was the general. The moment I made that decision, sitting there with Maya and Mr. Henderson, felt like drawing a line in the sand. The old Eliza, the one who tried to keep the peace and swallow her pain, was gone. In her place was a woman with a clear purpose, a quiet fire in her belly. This wasn't about yelling or screaming. It was about precision, about striking where it hurt the most. My voice as I recount this feels stronger, steadier than it ever did before. Our first move was to hit them where they least expected it. In the courtroom. Not with a big dramatic lawsuit right away, but with something called a civil suit for fraudulent misrepresentation and elder abuse. It sounded complicated, but Maya, bless her brilliant mind, broke it down for me. It meant we were accusing Marcus and Sarah of lying to me, tricking me, and taking advantage of me because of my age. We found an incredible pro bono legal aid society. A group of lawyers who work for free to help people who can't afford justice. They listened to my story patiently, intently. At first, I could see the skepticism in their eyes, another older black woman with a family dispute. But then, Maya presented her organized pile of documents. The shady mortgage papers, the bank statements showing the missing funds, the emails between Sarah and that crooked lawyer, Mr. Sterling. And then Mr. Henderson, with a quiet solemnity, produced the USB drive with Sarah's voice, clear as day, boasting about taking my house. The lawyers' faces changed. Their skepticism turned to stunned disbelief, then to a quiet fury on my behalf. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. I remember the day the official papers were served to Marcus and Sarah. I wasn't there, but Maya told me. She saw Marcus's face go white, the color draining out of him. Sarah's smug expression faltered, replaced by a flicker of panic. They had built their house of cards so carefully, believing it was untouchable. Now a small, determined grandmother, with the help of a smart granddaughter and a kind neighbor, was about to blow it all down. That was just the beginning. While the legal gears slowly began to turn, we started a different kind of fight. A public one. Not with shouting or protests, but with truth quietly delivered. Maya, with her understanding of how the world works now, suggested we reach out to local news outlets known for investigative journalism. We didn't make wild accusations. Instead, we leaked carefully chosen pieces of verifiable information. Documents showing Sarah's past dubious business dealings, hushed rumors about Marcus's questionable financial decisions at his high-profile job, all subtly linked to my own unfolding story. We didn't need to say much. The facts spoke for themselves, allowing people to connect the dots. The news stories, small at first, like ripples in a pond, began to spread. First, A local blog picked up on the real estate irregularities tied to a prominent local family. Then, a small online news site ran a piece hinting at elder fraud investigations involving a well-known community figure. Marcus, who craved public approval like air, suddenly found himself facing uncomfortable questions at work. His colleagues, his superiors, the people he desperately wanted to impress, started looking at him differently. Sarah, who reveled in her perfect public image, her carefully curated online persona, saw her facade crack. Her meticulously planned, lavish wedding, which she had flaunted all over social media, suddenly became the subject of uncomfortable whispers. I remember seeing Sarah at the grocery store one afternoon. She was pushing a cart, her hair perfectly styled, but her eyes darted nervously. She looked over her shoulder, jumpy, no longer the picture of serene confidence. Our eyes met across the aisle. Her face, usually so composed, flushed crimson. She quickly turned her cart and hurried away. It was a small victory but deeply satisfying. The public humiliation, subtly orchestrated by me and Maya, was a consequence Sarah hadn't anticipated. She thrived on admiration. Now she was tasting the bitter medicine of public scrutiny and quiet judgment. This wasn't about violence or brute force. It was about exposing the truth, letting the natural consequences of their own greed and cruelty unfold. Marcus's lucrative job, the one that depended entirely on his impeccable public image, began to suffer. Big business deals he was working on suddenly fell through. Key business associates started distancing themselves, wary of being associated with scandal. Sarah's dreams of a magazine-worthy wedding, complete with lavish sponsorships, crumbled as companies pulled out, terrified of the bad publicity. I felt a quiet, grim satisfaction knowing they were finally feeling the pressure, experiencing the real-world impact of their actions. The section ends with a chilling moment. My phone, which had been silent for so long, finally rang with an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. It was Sarah, her voice stripped of its usual charm, laced with a raw, desperate panic. She tried to plead, to offer a settlement, anything to make the news stop, to make the inquiries go away. Her voice cracked, unraveling. But Eliza, calm and unmoved, simply hung up the phone. Sarah's fear was palpable. A delicious confirmation that Eliza's quiet storm was finally breaking through their arrogance, striking at their very core. The sound of Sarah's desperate voice on the phone, begging me to stop, was like music to my ears. It wasn't about hate anymore, not really. It was about balance, about the scales of justice finally tipping back in my favor. The legal case was moving forward, slow but steady, thanks to my amazing pro bono lawyers. But I knew the real final showdown wouldn't be just in a courtroom. It had to be bigger, more public. It had to be a place where all their carefully built lies would crash down around them. The day of the preliminary hearing arrived, a crisp morning that felt strangely charged with electricity. It wasn't a full trial yet, just a chance for the judge to hear our evidence and decide if there was enough to proceed to a bigger case. But for me, this was it. This was the moment for the truth to come spilling out. Marcus and Sarah walked in, looking like they'd aged 10 years in a few months. Their faces were pale, their expensive clothes seemed to hang on them, and their usual arrogant smiles were gone, replaced by thin, nervous lines. They were flanked by their high-priced lawyers, who still tried to project an air of confidence, but even they seemed a bit uneasy. The room was hushed, thick with tension. Every eye seemed to be on me. My lawyer, a kind but sharp woman named Ms. Evans, called me to the stand. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my voice, when I spoke, was surprisingly clear and steady. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I simply stated the facts, each word a quiet hammer blow against their deceit. I explained how Marcus had convinced me to sign the power of attorney, how he'd told me he was protecting me, how he'd manipulated my trust. I laid out the financial fraud, piece by painstaking piece. The dwindling pension checks, the mysterious withdrawals, the mortgage taken out on my house without my full knowledge. Maya, sitting in the front row, nodded subtly, a silent cheer of support. Then came the moment that truly shattered their composure. Miss Evans asked for the recording to be played. The judge, her expression stern, gave the go-ahead. The sound of Mr. Henderson's accidental recording filled the quiet courtroom. Sarah's voice, clear and undeniably gleeful, echoed through the room. I could hear her bragging, talking about Mama Eliza's house money, paying for their dream wedding. Her laughter, so casual, so cruel, sent a shiver through the room. You could feel the air thicken, everyone in shock. Sarah's face contorted, a silent scream of fury and utter defeat. Marcus stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched, but I could see the sweat beading on his forehead. He tried to interrupt, to deny it all, to shout over the recording, but his words were drowned out by the undeniable evidence, by Sarah's own voice condemning them both. Sarah herself half rose from her seat, a look of pure hatred in her eyes, trying to lunge forward, but her lawyer quickly restrained her. I just watched them, my gaze steady. There was no triumph in my heart, no wild satisfaction, just a profound sense of peace. I didn't need to gloat. The truth, finally revealed, was doing all the work. My voice remained controlled, wise, dignified as I answered the judge's questions, explaining my motivation not as revenge, but as a fight for justice, not just for myself, but for all elders who are preyed upon. The judge, her face hard and unyielding, didn't hesitate. She looked at Marcus and Sarah, her voice cutting through the tension in the room. She ordered an immediate freeze on all their assets, preventing them from moving or hiding any more money. She then set a date for a full trial, hinting at serious charges, not just for fraud but for elder abuse, which carried a heavy weight. The atmosphere in that room shifted completely. The powerful, arrogant couple were now pale, trembling, utterly exposed. They were no longer untouchable. The weak woman, the ugly grandmother they had dismissed, now dominated the room, not with force, but with the undeniable power of truth. I walked out of that hearing, not with a triumphant shout, but with a quiet lightness in my steps. The heavy burden I had carried for so long, the weight of their betrayal, was finally lifted. Maya linked her arm through mine, her smile bright and full of love, a silent testament to our unbreakable bond. Mr. Henderson offered a small, knowing smile, a nod of respect. I looked back just once at Marcus and Sarah. They were still sitting there, slumped in their seats, their faces a mask of utter despair. Their carefully constructed world had just imploded. I walked away, not alone, for I had reclaimed my self-worth and found true allies. I was finally free from the toxic grip of their betrayal, ready to face whatever came next. The courtroom, the stairs, the satisfying crack of their world breaking. That was years ago now. Time has a strange way of healing, of softening the sharp edges of pain, but it also has a way of solidifying lessons learned. I'm sitting on my porch now, the sun warm on my face, a gentle breeze rustling through the wind chimes. I hung myself. This isn't my old house, the one they stole, but it's a home. A true home I built for myself, piece by quiet piece, after the dust settled. My hands, once trembling with fury or despair, now tend to my small garden, coaxing life from the soil, much like I coaxed my own life back from the brink. Rebuilding wasn't easy. It wasn't a sudden burst of sunshine after the storm. It was a slow, deliberate process, like mending a favorite quilt, stitch by careful stitch. The emotional scars remain, of course, deep lines etched into my soul, but they're not wounds anymore. They're reminders of where I've been, of what I've overcome. I found myself drawn to helping others, volunteering at a local community center, sharing my real-life stories with other elders. I helped them understand confusing legal papers, offered an ear for their own betrayal stories, and sometimes, just shared a cup of coffee and a moment of quiet understanding. I started a small book club, rediscovered the joy of reading, of learning new things, and found a vibrant community that saw me, truly saw me, not as an old woman who was a victim, but as Eliza Mae Jenkins, a survivor with a story worth telling. My identity, once threatened by Marcus's cruel words, was now stronger, more vibrant than ever. I learned that my worth was inherent, something no one could ever give or take away. It just was. And what about the others? Marcus, my son, stripped of his job and his public image, faced a lighter sentence than Sarah, but the consequences were heavy for him. He was ordered to pay back what he'd taken bit by bit, but the true punishment for him wasn't legal. It was losing everything he thought made him important. His fancy friends deserted him, his career vanished, and the respect he craved vanished into thin air. He tried to apologize years later, a hollow, mumbled apology over the phone. I listened. I acknowledged it. But I didn't let him back into my life. The trust was shattered beyond repair. It's a sad thing to lose your child to greed, but I found peace in knowing I had done all I could, and now I had to protect my own peace. Sarah, on the other hand, faced the full force of the law. Her past schemes, her calculated deception, all came to light. She served time, a consequence she truly deserved. I heard through the grapevine that her charming smile had long since faded, replaced by bitterness and regret. Karma stories have a way of playing out, don't they? Clara, my sister, eventually came to me, humbled, full of tearful apologies. She admitted her part in spreading the gossip, in subtly undermining me. It's been a long, slow process, but we've begun to mend our relationship, brick by careful brick. Auntie May, the instigator, simply disappeared from our community, unable to face the truth of her own poisonous words. Maya, my brilliant granddaughter, went on to become a fierce advocate for elder rights, carrying on my fight in her own powerful way. And Mr. Henderson, my quiet, loyal neighbor, remained a steady, comforting presence, a true friend who saw the truth when others turned a blind eye. The biggest lesson I learned, the one I carry with me every day, is this: survival isn't just about living. It's not just about getting through the hard times. It's about choosing your worth every single day, no matter what others say or do. It's about understanding that you are valuable, that your experiences matter, and that your dignity is something no one can ever truly take away unless you let them. It's about finding your voice, even when you thought it was gone forever, and using it to stand up for yourself and for others. It's about recognizing that sometimes, the quietest person in the room has the loudest, most important story to tell. It's about knowing that even after the darkest storm, the sun will rise again, and you can build something beautiful from the ruins. My story is a true story with a twist, a motivational tale for anyone who's ever been knocked down. If you're a survivor, if you've ever been underestimated, if you've had to fight for your peace and reclaim what's yours, then you know this feeling. Your story matters too. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Subscribe now. Let's share our strength and remind the world that a quiet voice, a seemingly insignificant grandmother, can be the most powerful one of all.